Did you hear about the case of Elisabeth Fritzl? She was held inside of a concealed area in the cellar of her family home built by her father, Joseph Fritzl, for 24 years. During that time, her father assaulted, sexually assaulted, and raped her numerous times. These incestuous rapes resulted in the birth of 7 children, one of which passed away shortly after birth. Then Joseph cremated the body himself. This is one of the most disturbing cases I've ever researched. Take a deep dive with me as we discover the horrors that took place in the life of Elisabeth Fritzl. I'm Shani Allure, and this is The Darkest Side of Crime. On August 28, 1984, after Elisabeth had turned 18, Joseph lured her into the basement of the family home, saying that he needed help carrying a door. In reality, he had been converting the basement into a makeshift prison chamber. The door was the last thing he needed to seal it. After Elisabeth held the door in place while Joseph fitted it into the frame, he held an ether-soaked towel on her face until she was unconscious, then moved her into the chamber. This is when the nightmare began. He immediately started raping her the first day of her captivity. Following Elisabeth's disappearance, Rosemary, Elisabeth's mother, reported her missing. Nearly a month later, Joseph presented a letter to the police, which was the first of several that he compelled Elisabeth to write during her captivity. The letter indicated that she was fatigued from living with her family and was staying with a friend. She cautioned her parents against searching for her or she would leave the country. Joseph informed the police that she had probably joined a cult. Over the next 24 years, Joseph entered the hidden chamber almost every day for a minimum of 3 times a week, bringing food and other supplies and repeatedly raping Elisabeth. She gave birth to 7 children during her captivity. 1 child died shortly after birth. 3 of the infants, Lisa, Monica, and Alexander, were taken from the chamber and placed in the care of Joseph and his wife, who were recognized as suitable foster parents by local social services. Officials reported that Joseph provided a very plausible account of how 3 of his infant grandchildren ended up on his doorstep. The family was subject to routine visits from social workers, who observed nothing during these encounters to raise any alarms. Following the 4th child's birth in 1994, Joseph allowed the enlargement of the chamber from 380 square feet to 590 square feet, putting Elisabeth and her children to work digging out soil with their bare hands for years. The captives had a television, a radio, and a video cassette player. Food could be stored in a refrigerator and cooked or heated on hot plates. Elisabeth taught the children to read and write. At times, Joseph would punish them by shutting off their lights or refusing to deliver food for days at a time. He told Elisabeth and the 3 children who remained, Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix, that they would be gassed if they tried to escape. Investigators concluded that this was an empty threat to frighten the victims. There was no gas supply to the basement. Joseph also told them that they would be electrocuted if they tried to meddle with the cellar door. The scare tactics he used to keep them in captivity was truly sick and very twisted. Now, according to his sister-in-law, Christine, Joseph entered the basement every morning at 9 a.m. to draw plans for machines which he sold to manufacturing firms. He often stayed there for the night and did not allow his wife to bring him coffee. A tenant who rented a ground floor room in the house for 12 years claimed to hear noises from the basement, which Joseph said were caused by faulty pipes or the gas heating system. Now, it is very hard for me to fathom my husband having an area of the house where I also live, to which was off limits to everyone but him. It's also unsettling to know there were children crying and a woman shouting giving birth, being raped and beaten below her feet, and she heard absolutely nothing for 24 years. Rosemary was cleared of any involvement. but I still have my own thoughts on that. Moving on. On April 19th, 2008, Joseph agreed to seek medical attention after Kirsten Elisabeth's oldest daughter fell unconscious. Elisabeth helped him carry Kirsten out of the chamber and saw the outside world for the first time in 24 years. He forced Elisabeth to return to the chamber where she remained for one final week. Kirsten was taken by ambulance to a local hospital and was admitted in serious condition with life-threatening kidney failure. Joseph later arrived at the hospital claiming to have found a note written by Elisabeth. He discussed Kirsten's condition and the note with a doctor by the name of Albert Reiter. Medical staff found aspects of Joseph's story puzzling and alerted police on April 21st. The police would broadcast an appeal on public media for the missing mother to come forward and provide information about Kirsten's medical history. The investigation into Elisabeth's disappearance was also reopened. Joseph repeated his story about Elisabeth being in a cult and presented what he claimed was the most recent letter, dated January 2008, posted from the town of Keemeton. The police contacted Manfred Wolfert, a church officer and an expert on cults, who raised doubts about the existence of the group Joseph described. He noted that Elisabeth's letters seemed dictated and oddly written. I want to add, I'm so glad that he recognized the coercion involved in the writing of these letters. So good for him for staying vigilant during this case. Elisabeth pleaded with Joseph to be taken to the hospital where Kirsten was being treated. On the 26th of April, he released her from the cellar, along with her sons Stefan and Felix, bringing them upstairs, at which time he and Elisabeth went to the hospital. Following a tip-off from Dr. Reiter that they were at the hospital, the police detained them on the hospital grounds and took them to police station for questioning. Elisabeth did not provide police with more details until they promised her that she would never, ever have to see her father again. Elisabeth recounted that her father raped her, forced her to watch pornography videos, and reenact them with him. Sometimes he would do this in front of the children to humiliate her. Joseph Fritzl, age 73, was quickly arrested on suspicion of serious crimes against family members. Following his arrest, Joseph claimed that his behavior toward his daughter did not constitute rape, but was actually consensual. Joseph said that he always knew during the whole 24 years that what he was doing was not right, that he must have been crazy to do such a thing. Yet it became a normal occurrence to lead a second life in the basement of his home. This man, and I use the term very lightly, is truly demented. Joseph stated that his decision to imprison Elisabeth came about after she did not adhere to any of his rules anymore when she became a teenager. That is why I had to do something. I had to create a place where I could keep Elisabeth, by force if necessary, away from the outside world, Joseph told his lawyer. Allow me to explain the living conditions Elisabeth and her children were forced to live in for 24 years with no fresh air or escape to the outside world. The concealed cellar had a 5-meter-long corridor, a storage area, and 3 small open cells connected by narrow passageways, along with a basic cooking area and bathroom facilities, followed by 2 sleeping areas, which were equipped with 2 beds each. It covered an area of approximately 590 square feet. The cell had 2 access points, a hinged door that weighed 500 kilograms, which is thought to have become unstable over the years because of its weight, and a metal door reinforced with concrete and on steel rails that weighed 300 kilograms and measured 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. It was located behind a shelf in Joseph's basement workshop, protected by electronic code entered using a remote control unit. In order to reach this door, 5 locking basement rooms had to be crossed. To get to the area where Elisabeth and her children were held, 8 doors in total needed to be unlocked, of which 2 doors were additionally secured by electronic locking devices. He really wanted to keep her there forever. Even though he wrote a letter the year prior to their escape, he said in the letter that he wanted to bring the family home upstairs, but just didn't know how. At one point, he thought about staging a rescue from the cult he said that had Elisabeth. I honestly don't think he was ever going to release her. Maybe the children, but not her. He also kept his mother captive for 20 years in the attic of that same home he brought in 1959. He locked her in and bricked up her window after telling neighbors that she had died. She did end up passing while in captivity in 1980. So there were multiple red flags that he was more than capable of doing this to his own daughter. If her eldest daughter would have never gotten deathly ill, they all would be down there still. I personally believe this to be true. I believe they would have died there. This man was wicked. As for the wife, Rosemary, I don't believe she knew absolutely nothing of his wrongdoings. This is a very hard concept for me to be convinced of. Joseph has been sexually abusing Elisabeth since she was 11 years old, starting in 1977. This further explains why she would run away from home as a minor, but was always brought back to her abuser by authorities. Not feeling safe enough to tell authorities what was happening at home showed the extent of the abuse Elisabeth endured growing up in a household with Joseph. Rosemary, her mother, either knew about the abuse or she didn't, but she failed to protect her daughter. On March 19, 2009, Joseph was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 15 years. He told the courts that he accepted the sentence and would not appeal, even though eventually he did. Joseph is currently serving out his sentence in Garston Abbey, a former monastery in Upper Austria, converted into a prison. Elisabeth and her children were taken into care and were housed at a local clinic where they were shielded from the outside environment and received medical and psychological treatment. Members of the Fritzl family were offered new identities, but it was ultimately their decisions to make. Kirsten, the eldest daughter, woke from her artificially induced coma and was reunited with her family on June 8, 2008. Doctors said that she would make a full recovery. Elisabeth Fritzl's story is one of cruelty, silence, and survival. It shows how evil can hide in plain sight, and we never know just what is behind closed doors. The story also shows how unbreakable the human spirit can be. Elisabeth's survival reminds us that we can listen and believe survivors. Silence is broken and justice can rise. Our thoughts and prayers are with Elisabeth and her children. May life be wonderful to you all going forward. This has been a trip inside the darkest side of crime. I'm Shani Allure. Stay safe, stay aware, and stay in the light.